Let's address the elephant in the room. Immigration by nature is discrimination, right? Yeah. We have this privilege, and we're sitting down in our high chairs, and we are selecting.
With business immigration, I find that there's a large gap between government expectations and the reality of how business works.
If you're trying to attract top quality business people, give them the rules that make sense.
Added at 0.2%, we're making startup visa entrepreneurs wait in line for 40 months. Does that make sense?
If those issues or problems were identified earlier and there was a culture of continual improvement, that would really make the chances of success much higher.
The biggest risk to any immigration program anywhere is a sense that government's lost control. If that happens, then the ability's room to maneuver on any topic is compromised.
I think you just put the solution of all solutions on the table. Hello and welcome to another Catalyst Canada Roundtable. As usual, and before we dive in, allow me to give a brief introduction of our distinguished guests, all lawyers with extensive experience practicing immigration law across multiple global jurisdictions. In alphabetical order, we have Sarah Adler, senior immigration lawyer at McCarthy Tétrault. Sarah is also a licensed lawyer in the state of New York and has been advising a diverse range of clients for more than 15 years. We have David Crawford, managing partner of Fragment Canada. David's dynamic career includes practicing law in United Kingdom and Australia. In a former life, David has acted as an Australian diplomat. And we have Charles Pley, founder and principal attorney at Immigration Solutions Law Group. With over 30 years of experience across all sides of immigration law, Charles is a certified specialist by the Law Society of Ontario and has also worked for the government as a visa officer and a previous diplomat. Charles is also licensed to practice law in the state of New York. Beyond their legal practice, all of our distinguished guests have been actively engaged with immigration policy making. Charles is a go-to person, trusted advisor of IRCC. You have advised and trained their visa officers. David, you have are sitting on numerous boards and chambers of commerce, assisting organizations with immigration policy making. And Sarah, you're a prominent writer and speaker on economic immigration in Canada, particularly the express entry system. Mm-hmm. This is, of course, just a glimpse of the diversity and the extent of the experience that our guests are bringing to the roundtable today. So I encourage the audience to check out our website at catalystcanada.ca to learn more about our guests. With that, let's dive in. Let's jump right into what we are here to talk about. We are at war. This is a real, literal war that was brought onto us by the incumbent U.S. president, I think for the sole purpose to crippling our economy and forcing us into submission to American rule. Before this war, we were not doing okay economically. We were far, far, far from okay, right? From productivity, which is basically the measure of the living standard in Canada. The Bank of Canada came out and said there's an emergency, quote unquote, they said break glass. There is business investment. We, I think, remain the only G7 that have less business investment in business, machinery, equipment, and IP than residential real estate. There is, of course, the entrepreneurial crisis. BDC had a report that the rate of entrepreneurship in Canada has been reduced by 50% in the last 20 years. And entrepreneurs are the ones that are creating the economy, creating the jobs. There is inflation and everything else. So a reasonable, sane person would say, thank God we have immigration, right? There is immigration that we can leverage the system to help us, get the country out of this mess. But when you look at this immigration system as closely as we do, all lawyers practicing, we see that not only we're doing that, but we're doing the exact opposite. In immigration, 60% of which is economic immigrants, and that's the topic of our today. Out of that 60% of immigrations, we are doing only 0.2% business immigrants. And business immigrants are really the ones that can bring us the capital, the innovation, the jobs, and the entrepreneurship that we need to revive the economy. So that's a big, big problem. And we want to talk about, should it be this way? Is the current business immigration framework doing the job that we want it to do? Or how can it be better? Let's start alphabetically and then it's going to be free for all. So Sarah, what do you think on this?
On how we can do immigration better?
Business immigration.
Business immigration. With business immigration, I find that there's a large gap between government expectations and the reality of how business works. The business world is changing very, very quickly, particularly with the introduction of AI, with the introduction of other technologies. And government seems to have not have kept up with the same type of pace. And I think there needs to be an evening out and a connecting of the conversations between the business-minded and entrepreneurial-minded individuals and the government, so they can just start talking on the same page. And I think there's a real gap that needs to be bridged.
Do you think, what about the numbers, right? You're saying, okay, there's a detachment between how business works in reality and how the program works in design and on paper. What do you think about the numbers? Does it make sense based on the economic challenges that we're dealing with? So business immigration takes up 0.2% of overall economic immigrants, and then out of that 0.2%, we're making startup visa entrepreneurs wait in line for 40 months. Does that make sense? And from a quantitative perspective?
So from a quantity perspective, I see that is two separate questions. So one is the volume of the people that we're bringing in. When it comes to people, entrepreneurs, individuals who want to start their businesses, those are really the groups that feed and grow economy, that inspire and build jobs, build opportunities, build tax revenues. We're definitely not supporting that group well. And there can definitely be increased numbers in that area. I almost think it's pivotal in the current economy and the situations that we're currently facing, that group is increased. The other aspect of the numbers is the timing. Those long durations of processing times don't keep pace with business. So when you've got a long processing time, your business opportunity can come and go before you get a chance to settle. It's really, really difficult to build a business which is uncertain enough when your status is uncertain, whether you're moving is uncertain. It's very difficult to make decisions which often need to be made very, very quickly. So there's from a quantitative basis, yes, we can improve our numbers into the system so we can increase our volume, but we also need to look at our timing and speed that up as well.
David, what do you think about that? The processing time, of course, ties directly into the number, right? If you increase the number, presumably processing times come down. But what do you think about the quantitative aspect in general?
Well, I want to first say that you would think at a time where we've got such low foreign direct investment, such a problem with the entrepreneurial spirit and activity in the country, that this is exactly the time where we would want to attract those things. And in a world where there is competition for people, interestingly, some of our major competitors have cut back on business immigration. So if Canada seizes the opportunity, it's there. One of the barriers I see is there is mistrust by officials or by government of business immigration. It's over 10 years since the investor category was abolished. And the other categories, the startup, the provincial arrangements, they're clunky, they're slow, and the numbers are small. And so to the quantity question, I think that in part it's about rules, and I'll come back to that in a moment. What I think is very clear in my mind is if you're trying to attract top quality business people, give them the rules that make sense, that they're transparent and they can self-select and say, we will give you a predictable processing time with transparent processes. And if you qualify, you can look forward to creating your future in this country. We don't do that. We don't have easy processes. We certainly don't have good processing times. And in the absence of those things, we will never have the quantity, nor will we attract the quality. And we can flip it on our head. I said I'd come back to the question of rules. In a sense, this has nothing to do with lowering standards. You can have very high standards and set the rules accordingly. That is not a question. And to have robust audit and appropriate penalties in place. So this is not about having a system that's easy, but it's having a system that's easy to understand and navigate. And there's a big difference.
Charles, I've got to throw you an assumption.
Sure.
Let's say we're doing immigration right. Let's say the rules are working the way that David is saying they should work. Right? What's the ideal number? Or what's the ideal increase? right? Because
Right.
like at 2026, we're doing 1,000, only 1,000 business immigrants. And let's not forget, that's a combination of startup visa entrepreneurs and federal self-employed program. So we don't really know how much is there, but 1,000. So in an ideal world, how much increase should we bring to the business immigration number?
Well, first of all, the number at 1,000 final dispositions a year is like, that's ridiculous. That has a minimal impact, and we're in a crisis right now. For all the reasons that have been discussed already. In terms of an actual number, I think that we have the capacity, and depending upon the program and the targeted outcomes, I'm going to throw a number out there of 10,000 a year. And don't forget that those targets, those numbers aren't actually people, they're families. So that 1,000 is not even 1,000 people or applications. That's, divide by 2.5. So it's quite a small number. Yeah.
And just to put that in perspective, 10,000 that Charles is suggesting, UAE did 250,000 entrepreneurial golden visa, they call it, in 2023, 250,000. And look at their size, look at their population, and look at our size, and look at our population. The US EB5 is much more than that. I think we have, we can check this, and for the sake of the audience and the accuracy, we can do subtitles later, but I think we have about 14,000 currently in the inventory for the startup visa. Right. So if we increase to 10,000, we're not helping anybody. We're just like processing the inventory that we have. What do you think about that?
I think it needs to be a bit of a graded system. If we're looking at new policies and new programs, I think there needs to be a period, and potentially short period, where there's a test case trial program, see how it works, and then opening it up further. I think there also has to be some other factors brought into the comparison with other countries. So it's not only population, but economic opportunity and industry. So there has to be a little bit more analysis when we look at what are appropriate numbers for our particular circumstances and community. I mean, right now, employers are already having a hard time finding people to fill roles. So if we're bringing in entrepreneurs who can't creating jobs but can't hire people, they're going to fail. So we got to keep in mind those larger economic factors as well.
That's very interesting. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Employers are having a tough time filling jobs, yet the 98.8% of economic immigration is premised on, hey, we're bringing in people that will fill those jobs. Like, where are we failing on that?
I think there's a disconnect. We've got a lot of people in this country, and many of them are being asked to leave. Now, I won't argue the politics of it, but I think the housing situation has exacerbated the political tensions. And as a consequence, we've had an immigration program that's being chopped by about 100,000 people from where it was going to be. And there are consequences. If you accept that there is a demographic challenge, that we've got more people falling off the labour market conveyor belt than coming on it. So to Sarah's point, there are less people around, and because of these other considerations, some of the people who might otherwise have stayed in this country are being asked to leave. So we're potentially losing some people who would otherwise be contributors to the economy. Now, I don't want to get involved with the politics of that, but the fact remains that there is a disconnect between what will be our present, but more importantly, our future labour market requirements at a time when we're trying to create and innovate, and you need people to do the work. So the challenge is more than just business migration, for sure. But having said that, it's a chicken and egg situation. We want the entrepreneurs too. We have to be ambitious, and at the moment, if we worry about the problems, we're not going to see our way past them to get anywhere sensible.
Yeah, I think the dramatic cut in immigration, the government itself is admitting that's going to impact GDP. I think it was in the 1.2% range. So it's obvious that this is driven by other considerations and not solely economic. In terms of business immigration as a potential solution, one of the things about sort of business immigration parameters or requirements in the past has been tying success or outcomes to job creation. Job creation for sure is an objective kind of a measure, but is that the be all and end all? Is there room for the outcome being significant innovation, improvements in efficiency, capital investments, those kinds of things in critical areas? Those kinds of things are also outcomes. And so to Sarah's point, it is true that we have to be careful about creating a program where the entrepreneurs are by nature of the program competing with Canadian employers for scarce employees. But by the same token, maybe that shouldn't be the key criteria or outcome that we're looking for.
I think a lot of it has to do with what is it that we want from the immigration system, right? Like I think we have to first figure that out. Do I want the immigration system to reward the lazy employer who doesn't want to invest in innovation, who doesn't want to invest in streamlining, who doesn't want to invest in efficiency, so I can just supplement the market and give the market cheap labor? Because in the past years, like at least from 2015, arguments have, like economics have been saying, the immigration system has been gearing towards low-skilled labor. And that low skill is not doing anything for the productivity. So let's go back to the big picture. What is this immigration system? What do we want from this immigration system? Do we want it to give us jobs, then focus on entrepreneurs so they can create the jobs, and then we worry about, who's going to fulfill these jobs? Or are we worried about, hey, just inject workers, and we don't even care about, to Sarah's point, right? We don't even care if these workers are filling the labor gap. What do you think about this objective, this grand scheme of what it is that Canada should want from its immigration system?
I think that pulls into a bigger question of who do we see ourselves as a country, and what do we want, and what are our objectives? And within the immigration system, we have to understand, what are our economic goals, what are our cultural goals, what are our social goals, and then build out from there. There's, just going back to the previous conversation a little bit, the economic needs are very much in different areas. So you've got, a glut of employers and skills in certain areas and nothing in other areas. And so part of it is identifying what those needs are and then filling those needs. And some of them are critical businesses, critical parts of our society. And we should be looking at encouraging an investment and an entrepreneurial spirit into those areas. So the question is, do we want to look at things by industry and sector? Will that become a complicated way of dealing with things? But I think we really need to look at what do we need and how do we fill those gaps.
So entrepreneurial spirit, do you agree?
I do. If bear in mind also that the way we think about immigration is largely a 1980s and 70s construct. And you could say across a whole range of things we've got to do better, and we should be doing better. You think about licensing arrangements around so many occupations in the country, or licensing arrangements from one province to another, or how to identify what the future of the labour market might be. And equally with business migration, we might worry, as you were saying, with how many people you're going to employ over a 3 or 5 year period of time. Is that where it should be at in a much more sophisticated technological environment? I don't think that we've got the answers now, but the complexity and the broad spectrum of change means there should be a fresh way of looking at things. And I'm sure we'll get onto a discussion about how government can get to know more by consulting better. But to me, there is, if not a root and branch reconstruction of the concept of immigration, certainly a revisiting a lot of these things. And coming back to it, that business migration is an element of a broader enterprise to make immigration work better for the country. And it goes to the question you're asking, where do we want to be by whatever, 2030, 2050 and so on? At the moment, I think we're struggling, and our policies are driven by what's happened in the last 12 months.
At the very least, we want to exist.
Yeah.
right? At the very least,
That's a good starting point.
Have you ever thought that we may have this conversation that we want to exist as an independent nation, and what can keep that independence? We need some power, and that power, at least a big part of it, without getting into a philosophical the conversation about, hey, what is nationhood, what is statehood? Economy is a very big part of it. Okay, so let's agree that if economy is a very big part of that power, and we want to build that power, it really then kind of boils down to how we look at economy. Is GDP inflation the goal? Just bring in as many people as you can so they start spending so GDP grows? Or is GDP per capita the goal? Is the living standard, is the productivity that matters? Is what they're saying, the Bank of Canada is saying, break glass, it's an emergency. So if GDP per capita is the goal, no disagreement on the table so far? Okay. So if GDP per capita is the goal, economists have put it down for us. GDP per capita, you need high skills, you need capital investment, you need innovation, and all of these things come together in entrepreneurship. So there's an obvious case for redoing business immigration. One part of it was numbers. I think we agree it should be a lot more. We don't know 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Sarah had a very good point. Let's try it out. Let's, live, learn, improve. Okay, let's say we're going to open it up. Government is going to listen. We're going to open up. We're going to have more numbers. Now let's get to the details of it. How is it going to work? The current state, what we have, 2 programs, federally speaking, right? Business immigration. There's the startup visa program, federal self-employed. Federal self-employed, we're not going to spend that much time because in a previous roundtable, we came to the conclusion that it was a confused program and it's on pause. They're not accepting application right now. But let's talk about how the startup visa program works right now, and then talk about how we can improve it. So right now, the startup visa program, 40-month processing time. Startup, you want to be an innovator, you want to come here, you want to compete, you have to wait 40 months before you get your permanent residency.
You sold off your business by then. You made your money.
And you probably change it to a lot of, exactly. So I'm assuming that everybody agrees processing time has to be cut. But then, okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are the solutions? What are the things? What are the top things that we can do in the startup visa scheme that can help with faster processing? But more important, I think that faster processing is your point, David, that I want predictability, right? I want some certainty. I don't want to sleep and wake up and you say, oh, now there is a cap. I don't want to sleep and then wake up and you say, oh, now the work permit, if you want to apply, you have to have an acknowledgement of receipt. And then the next day, no, you don't need an acknowledgement of receipt. Just give me it's proof that you submitted your application. So what are we can talk about the top challenges of the startup visa program in your opinion first, and then we can talk about, okay, what solutions can we impose on that can help alleviate those challenges. Do you want to go first, Sarah?
So there are a couple of things that I have in mind. One, again, processing times, but we've already covered that. Also, entrance into the program, there are some clarity issues, and the fact that we're relying on designated organizations to help to do the business analysis piece, how they're being given instructions on what they're doing, how they're being monitored. There's also, I think that the way that some of those organizations are set up, there is a self-interest that drives what they're doing, which is a conflict of interest. And there needs to be some form of separation so we can get an objective and educated analysis on the viability of the business. The other thing is the requirement for the program is that you have a viable prototype. And going from viable prototype to actual production you need to have a timeline for that. You got to be able to push it forward. And if you've got this kind of dead space in between, you're waiting with processing times. You're setting up the business to fail.
Okay, let's talk about that model. Okay, if you jumped into this conversation for no reason, let me tell you what Startup Visa Program is. The Startup Visa Program, we designed it because Canada said, I want innovators who can compete on a global scale and create a lot of jobs. Then Canada said, I, as the government, I can't decide the potential of the business. So then we have the model that we're talking about right now. We said, okay, designated organization, apply, I give you a designation. I delegate the responsibility of assessing the potential of that business to you, designated organization. And then if you say you support, I'll support. Is that a good system? Let's zoom out first. Is that delegation a good system design?
I think the delegation in itself is not necessarily problematic. I think it's trying to solve the problem of we don't necessarily understand how to evaluate what makes a good business, what makes a successful business. And so we're giving that to people who do understand how that operates and how those works and what those mechanisms are. And I think that's a really good step. The problem is that there is no direction or oversight on what expectations are from the government. So I think there needs to be a little bit, not micromanaging, but a little bit more direction. And on the other side, this connection, it needs to be a separate third party. We're calling them third parties, but they're not really third parties because often they are directly invested in the success of that particular business. So you're not necessarily getting an objective evaluation. I think the original idea was if you're going to invest in something, then, you've got skin in the game. And so you're going to make a full and complete assessment. But that hasn't really transpired in the same way.
So overall, you're happy with the delegation system. Are you happy, Charles, with the delegation system? We're delegating third parties, designated organization to do something we can't?
Yeah, I think in principle, it's actually a very good idea because government cannot pick winners and losers. So it really has to be people who are doing this kind of angel or VC investing every day. So that part of it, I think, is in principle not bad. You may or may not know that decisions by designated organizations to issue a commitment certificate and letters of support were subject to what were called peer reviews previously. And that turned up a lot of unfortunate practices, and the government has sort of taken that kind of peer review responsibility.
It's officially stopped now. There's no peer review right now.
Well, the government itself is going to be doing audits, right? So how good or bad that is, I'm not sure, but at least they sort of recognize the problem. I just want to step back on the processing times. These are startup visas. So the idea is that, there's an opportunity and you move quickly before that opportunity disappears or the competition, you need a head start. So the processing times at 40 months obviously are just, counterintuitive to the whole underlying basis of the program. The government has recognized that that's a problem, to be fair. So they are giving priority processing to certain designated organizations, angels, VCs in particular. And in my practice, I have seen that cases are moving in the process more quickly than they have in the past. The problem is the annual targets are now so low that these cases are ready for visa essentially, but there are no numbers available. So it goes back to the numbers question. Those numbers have to definitely be increased. And it's such an infinitesimal proportion of the economic immigration target that there's room definitely, to do that.
So we are good. You're good with it in principle too.
In principle, like anything, if the oversight is there, then it's got. I think it's got a good chance. But the oversight has been lacking. And to your point about the numbers, I would have thought there should be some categories that should be exempt from a limitation or given special license to get more. This would be one of them. So
okay. So oversight. Here's what the government did in oversight, right? I think the same problem that we had with the international student regime kind of got itself into, because, sick systems create room for sick behavior. In the international student regime, we had diploma mills. Just pay me the money, I'll give you a diploma. I don't care what you do. There's a class of 50. I have a registration of 2,500. These are like the real things that are happening. So in the startup visa, same thing happened. You had designated organizations that have global reputation with zero participation in the program. And then you had these new organizations that came up and then all of a sudden they were doing 500, 600, 700 applications a year. Policymaker woke up, punished everybody. He's like, I'm going to give everybody a cap of 10. right? Regardless of whether you are a world-renowned university incubator that can really bring us the next Shopify, you have 10. And you who did 500, 600 applications yesterday, and I know that you were abusing the system, you have 10 too. So this is obviously wrong, right? This is bad oversight. But what does good oversight look like? Like, let's go back to the objective of the program. I want high potential. I want job creation. I want economic stimulation, all of those things. I have the third party because I'm saying I want to delegate. But okay, how do I supervise you? How do I monitor you? What are the KPIs? What are your thoughts on that, Sarah? Good oversight, what does it look like?
That's a good question, because there's a balance. You want to balance your investment and your time with your outcomes. And do you target? Do you have a list of criteria that says if you don't meet this criteria, we're going to investigate? You want to be careful not to be overly penalizing a specific group. But at the same time, you don't want to create Band-Aid solutions that affect everybody. And I think that's part of the concern, particularly since some of these groups can be particular cultural groups, people, same attracts same. And if you target one that's causing a problem, you can also be accused of, being racist, targeting a specific minority group. So there's those kinds of sensitivities that are on part of that conversation in targeting specific actors. So you need to have a very objective criteria, and then potentially an audit process in which you can be removed from the program if you've been found to not be respecting the rules. However, that also requires a lot of time, a lot of investment, a lot of financial capital, particularly as we're seeing now. There's a lot of enforcement action happening in other immigration areas, which are taking a large amount of budget. So it's a very difficult question because there are many, many factors to balance when you're building a program.
So let's simplify. Difficult questions, the best way to do them is like simplify. One obvious solution: tie performance to capacity. Right? I'm not just going to give 10 to everybody. Let's just tie your performance to your capacity. So far, so good. But then again, okay, how do I measure your capacity? How do I measure your performance? Should I measure you based on the businesses you support, how many jobs they created? Should I measure you on the businesses you support in business continuity, intellectual property? Are they in the process of registering some IP? Have they raised any capital? Is that a good metric? The business you support, they came here, they're going door to door, could they convince somebody to put in some money into the business? What are those, if we just want to brainstorm some KPIs, what are those in your mind?
Before I go there, I mean, the oversight can take different forms, and on a specific situation that you talk about, or making inquiry of a particular organization, that's one. But in other countries, they have different levels, and the migration, the MAC, the MAC was established in the UK, I think, in 2008. In Australia, there have been a series of advisory groups that exist, and they will periodically review particular topics or areas of policy and report back. In addition to that, there will be specific reference groups established on reference from either a minister or Parliament to look into a policy area and to report back. So the oversight can take different forms. And there are consequences, not least for the agency that oversees a policy, in this case IRCC. So there are different layers and there are different consequences. To give, what we're talking about is getting what we think we're getting from a policy outcome, but also giving confidence to the local population that government's got it. They're on the issue. And as a general point, I would say that the biggest risk to any immigration program anywhere is a sense that government's lost control. If that happens, then the ability's room to maneuver on any topic is compromised. So you've got to have a mechanism, and yes, there will be cost, and those costs are typically being borne by the users of the system who pay money that's used for an audit purpose. That's not a new concept. In the case of the EB5 in 2022, I think they introduced a new integrity program under a new act. That's an example of something that's so common throughout the world. It's barely worth talking about, but does it happen here? And that's the point. So
I think you just put the solution of all solutions on the table. Because the solution of all solutions is you can never be perfect. We can brainstorm next 10 hours. I can bring in another 100 people, brainstorm KPIs, and then we put something on paper. It will never be perfect. What is perfect is a feedback loop.
Yes.
It's like, hey, let's try this.
And consequences.
Yes, and come back like the MAC model. I haven't looked into the MAC model in detail.
Migration Advisory Committee, just remembered. Got it.
Yes, and there's an independent body in the UK that is, the government pays for it.
Yep.
There are people like us on that committee. We're lawyers, but that committee has like more. There are academics, civil society. It's like an inclusive
industry people.
I'm sure there are a lot of criticism on that model, but at least it's something. In essence, I think it's a solution to all solutions, right? Consult. No solution is ever perfect. So go around and say, hey, I did this. I put a 10 cap on everybody. Is that a reasonable thing to do? Like, Charles, what do you think about this?
Well, I'm going to step back a little bit because, the startup visa program, you get a permanent resident visa. There's no condition on it. There's no requirement that the business, operate or be successful. The idea is that you're bringing in, entrepreneurs who are risk takers, and they're going to fail as much as they succeed. But it's the risk taker that you want, who has some capital and who's willing to try again, right? And I think that was the thinking of the government. So in terms of outcomes, I think that's probably philosophically why they didn't focus on, okay, is this creating jobs? Is this business successful or not? But I mean, at the end of the day, you can only measure success of a program if you're actually doing this kind of thing, auditing, okay, what happened? These people became permanent residents. Did this thing just shut down, or did this business actually operate? What IRCC is doing right now, which I applaud, is when it's coming time to assess the application, they're saying, okay, applicant, what have you done in the last year to advance the business? Your role is CFO. What have you done as CFO to advance this business, particularly if you've been in Canada on a work permit? So those kinds of things, just sort of going to the genuineness of the business are a good thing. But at the end of the day, you skate through that, you get your permanent resident visa, and there's no there's no sort of follow-up after that. Whether the government is doing any research on that, I don't believe is the case, but they certainly should be on what is actually happening to these people.
Are you recommending that, okay, there's another potential solution. Let's change the program. Let's not give PR at the outset. Let the entrepreneur prove themselves. And then we can talk about the KPIs, assuming there are some KPIs there, assuming there's some metrics that we can agree on. These are good metrics to measure them against. Is it a good idea to remove the PR at the outset? What do you think, Charles?
The fact that it's a direct to PR program separates the Canadian program from virtually all the startup visa programs around the world. Major advantage in terms of being able to market it and attractiveness and so on. So I personally would not favor the concept of giving people a temporary status. They invest all their capital, they take all these risks, they move their family, they maybe close down their business overseas, and they don't know whether at the end of the day they're going to have permanent resident status. That's something to me, like just talking to my clients, I think that's why the PNPs, these programs with the work permit initially have not been a huge success. If you have a choice between a direct to PR or a work permit performance agreement and all that risk, people are always going to choose the direct to PR route. What I do think, though, is that things like the investment that is being put in, the capitalization of the business, the $75,000 by an angel or $200,000 by a VC, is that really sufficient? And where really is that money coming from? Is that coming directly from the pocket of the VC or the angel who's assessed this business and said, yes, I'm going to invest in it as I would any commercial startup, that I've made that kind of assessment? Or is that money coming from fees that, the applicants have paid for various services? And to your point, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there then in those situations. Is that real money? So my thinking is that there should be probably more capital in these businesses beyond a requirement, beyond just what the commitment certificate is. In other words, the investors. So you're not going to get the Steve Jobs, who's straight out of his garage and has no capital kind of thing, because, he doesn't have the money. So the program is kind of designed to capture those guys too. But I think, if there's more capital going in that is not tied to this sort of commitment certificate process, which is a little bit conflict of interest kind of a scenario, I think you're going to get more real businesses. And then on the backside, doing the kind of longitudinal studies. Okay, how many of these turned into real businesses? And if they fail, that's not a bad thing.
No,
right?
it's not a bad thing, because you have to fail before you succeed, right?
But of course, you've got to have the follow-up and the reviews to know where, should there be some adjustments to policy. It's not a punitive thing necessarily about individual applicants. It's saying, did we let them down? Could the system be better? So there is a constructive, a positive element to that as well.
So, David, you agree that it's not user-friendly to remove the PR. I agree. Do you agree?
My preference would be to keep
Sarah,
PR.
What about you? Do you think PR should be there?
I think it should, because when you have a temporary status document, there are a lot of barriers that get put in place that actually make it harder to build the business. So it's harder to get funding. It's harder to get financing. If you need to do a loan, it's more difficult. It's more difficult to get office space if that's what you need to build your business, because the lending institutions and the residential institutions, like, you've got a temporary document. I don't know how long you're going to be here. I don't want to take the risk. And so it's by putting in a temporary document, you're kind of setting them up to make it something that's already hard even harder.
Yeah, and you're also compromising the PSYCAP, the psychological capital of people, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I want a temporary permit, I always have a stress, like, we have dealt with all of our clients, right?
Yeah.
The 80% of their mental capacity when they're on a temporary permit is like, oh, when am I going to get to PR? When am I going to get to PR and everything? Then I'm going to think about everything seriously after I have my PR. So, okay. So PR is definitely on the table, but let's go back to that point. Okay, PR is on the table, so we have to be extra careful on the selection side, right? Failure is okay. We can handle failure. We all fail on a daily basis. It's part of life. But I want to make sure that you have continuity. I want you to be a real entrepreneur, right? I don't want you to go to a VC that is playing to, is willing to play dirty. I'll pay you the money. You claim that you will put the money in my business. I get my PR. Then I become an astronaut. I become that investor. And then, hey, who cares about business, right? So that selection part is important. Now I want to zoom out a bit. If that selection part is important, the abuse that I think is happening on the startup visa, and please tell me if you disagree, much of that abuse is coming from users that are not a good match to this program. Who's that user? Investor. I want to pay my way into Canada. Canada doesn't have an investor program. Yeah, there is one in Quebec, but they want me to learn French, all of these things. It's not. No, I don't want to do that. What do I do? So, then you open it up to the market, just going after their own business, saying, oh, I'll create a startup for you. I'll make it look like you're a startup entrepreneur, and then you can use this program. So if we want to cut this abuse, one obvious solution is, hey, you have this user type. It's not the Steve Jobs that you were saying in your garage. I have no money, but I have a great idea. So let me give you a program, an investment program. So do you agree that if we want to cut that abuse in the startup visa program, we have to create a parallel program for that investor type? And also maybe for that entrepreneur type. Okay, I don't have the next AI revolution in mind, but I want to come, start a coffee shop. I want to come, start a small manufacturing plant. So then there's a need. If we want to cut that abuse, then maybe we need another stream. So we have one stream for the innovator, for the startup. We have one stream for the investor. We have one stream for the entrepreneur that wants to, engage with business on a day-to-day, but is not a startup entrepreneur. So what do you think about that?
I think it would definitely give opportunity for people to find a better fit for what they want to do. And it will make things clearer as opposed to trying to go between the lines and trying to move through a program that doesn't fit. I think an investor program is essential for many reasons. I think we're going to discuss that more later. And I think there's also a distinction between what I would call an entrepreneur and a self-employed person. So to me, a self-employed person is like the person who wants to have a coffee shop, but they're happy having that coffee shop. Or, they have a clothing store in their home country and they want to start the same thing here, but don't really have grand schemes of going further than that business, where to me, an entrepreneur is someone who's got an idea, who really wants to grow and bring investment into that idea and to develop it and to scale it. And the criteria for those different kinds of businesses is going to be very, very different. And if we're looking at KPIs, those KPIs are going to be very different because they have different functions. They operate completely differently.
David, what do you think about an investment program? Parallel with the startup.
Yeah, well, let's go back to the beginning of our conversation, foreign direct investment, which is different from getting into entrepreneurial skills into the economy and the country. We know that they have not been supported by officials. They're suspicious of them because of prior experience. So getting the rules right clearly are important. But if you imagine that we're sufficiently ambitious in terms of numbers and the amount of money to be invested and to lock it into something that the general population would say, that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. Somebody else from another country is funding this area of infrastructure, whatever it might be, and the broader community will all benefit. That's great. I like that. And so it builds, that by itself, I think, would build confidence in this being a program that is constructive and positive for all Canadians. So yeah, I think there's a role for it.
So there's a tagline, Future Canadians Building Future Canada. So we need that investment program, right?
Totally agree. And if there was ever a time in our history, this is probably it, where that kind of passive investment could be a huge help. Passive investment from the standpoint of the investor themselves, not being actually, building the business or whatever it may be. Just as sort of a general thought, because we've seen with the federal investor program previously that it was not clear where all that money was going. There was a guarantee actually to give the money back. I think it was Ontario because the money was partitioned between provinces, and Ontario sat on almost $100 million because they knew in 5 years they had to give that money back at 0% interest. Yeah. They didn't actually do anything with it, which was a horrible waste. Yeah. So I'm of the view that there has to be a very clear sort of target or outcome for that investment. Mm-hmm. So whether it be a housing accelerator fund or particular housing projects or something related to improving healthcare, or even, people will accuse me of, supporting, buying citizenship or whatever, but even paying down the debt, like the golden visa idea that Trump, God bless him, has.
God help him.
Whatever.
God bless him.
That was ironic. But so those kinds of very clear, saleable, publicly acceptable kind of targeted investments, I think this is probably the time. And the only downside is that our history is that, as things change, something happens, whatever, maybe the program won't be there forever, but the money will have been committed and hopefully managed well.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying it's not good to have the guaranteed investment because basically that's what you're saying happened. Yeah. The government got the money. I just pocketed the interest, which is like 4 or 5%, and then I paid you the money back. Right. Right. So it would have been, anyways. That was, we agreed that was not a good policy decision. So we want to make it at risk. We want to say, okay, I'm not guaranteeing your investment. It's at risk. But then when we go to the realm of at-risk investment, do you agree that we can use the same model that we have under Startup Visa for the passive investment program too? For example, okay, we have a designation system. Sarah, you are a builder. You get designated. Now I allow you to collect and pool immigrant investor money and then go to your project. The investor has to do the due diligence on their own, but I give them options. Maybe Charles is a venture capitalist. He comes and gets a designation for his VC, and David, for your hospital. Does that make sense?
So it's something like those designated areas under the EB5 that they get the right to authorize, and they're accountable for that. call them what you like. The same thing happens. If you don't have oversight, you've got more than risk. You've got likely problems. And so it would very, very heavily rely upon how is this going to be run. And I think that we could draw upon examples from elsewhere rather than invent the way that might happen. But yes, I think something like that would be. Or there are also examples where provincial or state governments or authorities have had the power to authorise that something is an investment appropriate channel for such a program. And there are examples there that we could draw upon. But I do like the at risk. And if somebody gets permanent resident status on the basis it is at risk and there is a perceived benefit, public benefit from this, such that we can build confidence in it, then I think that that's more saleable, because it's very difficult to accuse somebody of screwing the system if they put up a sizable amount of money that they may not get back.
Sure, they're still happy, but we don't want to provide a situation where you're not a builder, you're after that investment money only. Right? Or you're not a venture capitalist, you want that investment money only. And that if we don't have proper oversight, that will happen.
That's
With the EB5, it happened a lot.
That's exactly right. There are clear lessons. So I don't think that we're saying this is easy, any of this.
No.
If we were saying that, there would be a significant problem.
Exactly.
So, but what we're saying is there's an opportunity to try and get this right. And there are consequences, positive consequences if we do. That's all. So certainly some of these concepts need to be investigated, but I think the possibility is there.
Yeah, and there are models. There are models that we can draw
upon.
100%. But let's go back to what Charles said. I don't want to get accused by offering, hey, you're buying citizenship. What is wrong with that?
Yeah.
What is wrong with, well, we're not talking selling citizenship. Like a lot of small countries some countries, they're getting 50% of their GDP by selling citizenship.
Yep.
Thank God we're not there yet. But what's wrong with selling residency? Like, what's this moral, normative problem? People saying...
I think part of it is just the concept. The concept is I'm buying citizenship. So if I put my money in and I'm purchasing it and there's no screening, there's no oversight, which is not the reality. I mean, if you have an investor like this, program like this, you're still going to be, screening for likely where the money's come from.
100%.
You're going to be screening for, criminal issues, medical issues, where the where the money is going. So it's not, I give you my money, I get my
pass.
Right. There's more of a process within that, and I don't think that's understood. So I think it's partially a messaging issue and a conceptual issue than an actual problem.
And one more point, that if they got permanent resident status, it's vastly different from citizenship.
Yes.
Some of those Caribbean countries do have citizenship up for grabs. If a person qualifies for permanent resident status and does wish to become a citizen, they've got to meet all the requirements, including the residential requirements. And that is
language requirements now.
Yeah.
There's a criminal requirement. You have to behave and you have to be healthy. I'll say it. I just, when I say it, I just realize how discriminatory this is. So let's address the elephant in the room. Immigration by nature is discrimination, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have this privilege and we're sitting down in our, high chairs and we're selecting. You're a skilled worker, you're still proving things to me. It's not like if you're a skilled worker, I'm saying, oh, here's a red carpet. Just because you're bringing me your sweat, I'm giving you residency. No, you have to do a lot more. So it's everywhere, this selection, this monitoring.
Yeah. So I think that's a relevant consideration, saying, no, we're not selling citizenship. It is a much better way to express it. And I think that was shorthand that was dragged out many years ago by the press, trying to talk down the prior programs. But I think that all these other complexities about qualifying for citizenship and what that the consequences that means, that's part of the discussion. There is definitely a discourse to be had in a program coming back. There is a positive message about what it means for the country.
What is that positive message? For the passive investor?
Yeah. So so we were talking about the money is at risk. And it's targeted to economic imperatives, right? But I personally, and this is where the whole selling of citizenship, which is obviously not, because you have to meet the requirements to become a citizen, which are not necessarily easy. Like if you're an astronaut, you're never going to become a citizen.
Yeah.
You really have to spend your time here. But I think in principle, there is nothing wrong necessarily with a contribution component to that investment. In other words, a non-refundable, not even at risk, sort of managing the money. This money is going to some particular purpose, and this person has donated or contributed those funds to that. Maybe not the whole amount of their passive investment, but maybe a significant portion. I think that because on the backside, in terms of what you're doing with the money and how you're managing it, you now have available capital that's kind of unrestricted, and off you go and get these, economic imperative programs on the way. The at-risk portion is, I'm just spitballing a little bit, but I think it's important just in terms of being able to sell the program and gain public acceptance.
For the public acceptance part, there's another criticism of the passive investment program that made a lot of headlines from a lot of prominent scholars and researchers, which we have invited to participate in the roundtables. And it's, okay, you're allowing people to get their residency through these programs. They come here, they buy expensive houses, and then it makes the housing crisis worse. Do you find that argument, is that a good argument? Let's not bring in the passive investor who we want to come. They bring their life and their family here and their money to contribute to our economy. Now, because they're buying a $5 million home, we don't like them.
I think there are many, many more factors that contribute into the housing crisis. And it's an oversimplification of what the overall issues are. If we're looking at what we said, 30,000 applicants at some point, that is a small proportion of the number of people who are actually purchasing houses and need housing within the country. So what is that impact going to be? And how are they paying for those? Are they buying houses that are, not generally within the price range and the style within the regular market? Like there's so many different factors. I think it's a way oversimplification saying that one contributes.
So it's an emotional response.
It's an emotional response.
What do you think, David?
It's a red herring.
Yeah.
You agree?
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, the statistics show, right? More than, 60% of Canadians are property owners. So if the majority of ours are a property owner, we want the property value to go up. Right? Isn't that a natural thing that a property owner would want? But demand creates value for this property. The only thing that the country, property owner, not property owner, should worry about is maybe it's a bubble, because the bubble is not good for everybody, right? That popularity that causes property prices to go up is because it's, all I did was, I opened the floodgates and now all investors are coming here. They're going to spend some time here. Then they realize Canada is not the Canada I thought. So I'm going to sell my property and go back. The bubble bursts. But if I really allow them to come here, buy their property, let their kids go to school, let their kids grow roots, let their wives, let their spouses be here, right? Because that's the whole idea of an astronaut. Again, if you just dropped into this conversation, as an astronaut is someone who comes to Canada, earns the money somewhere else, travels, but the family is here. So they're growing roots, right? If they're growing roots and we give them the support that they can use, then maybe it's not a bubble, right? It's a good thing.
Well, if anybody comes into this country as an immigrant or as a temporary resident, or call it what you like, there is a supply of labor, whatever that looks like, and there is a demand for goods and services. That will include a house or a dentist or groceries or a car, a whole lot of other things that are going to benefit a whole lot of other people. It is a nonsense to say we don't want to provide houses for immigrants coming into the country because that will create a demand problem. That doesn't make sense. In any case, anybody who would advance that simply doesn't understand basic economics or what an immigration program is designed to do. It's designed to increase the productive capacity and, to your point, increase GDP over and above the existing rate of GDP per head.
And in fact, those studies that criticize the passive investment program or even the entrepreneur programs, they looked at only the tax filings of the person, right? They didn't look at, and to be fair, one of those studies literally says that this study is limited because we didn't look at what David is saying we should look at, right? The money that we really spend in the economy, the rich kid going to the mall and spending on our retail, on our food, on our hospitality, the travel that they do, the cars that they buy, the commission that goes to the realtor, all of those things. We didn't look at that. We just looked at, the main applicant, who was the astronaut, who we didn't create the context for in Canada, and he prefers to still make the money outside of Canada, didn't file any tax, right? The tax filing is less than anything that the average Canadian is making.
I think the other aspect of that too is if you're talking about making an at-risk investment of $1 million, $2 million, maybe even $3 million, and you compare that to what the average Canadian pays in taxes over the course of their lifetime, it's likely more that they're investing up front. So if you're going to compare tax contributions, you need to factor in what is the financial contribution that they're actually making in a lump sum.
What's a fair number? Because Sarah was talking about maybe 3 million, right? If it can sell more, why not? It's better for, but it's better for Canada. What do you think is a fair number? When Trump is talking about a $5 million golden visa, and nobody likes America right now, Canada is the perfect, perfect alternative.
Yeah. So, what the actual number is, you kind of have to test the market. In the past, these were, a lot of these were financed investments because they were guaranteed returns. So you could go to the bank and say, in 5 years, I'm going to have X amount. So the bank says, oh, no problem, I'll loan you. And then you just put like a small percentage of the money in. So there's really not that much skin in the game by the investor. I think that has to be avoided. Again.
Of course, 80% of the money that came from was printed in Canada, right? It wasn't foreign money. Exactly. They financed it.
Yeah. So, but again, I come back to where's the money going? If it's like a clear publicly supported end use of the funds, I think that will go a long way. What the actual number is, 2 million would be high. That's more like in the UK kind of number.
Yeah, they went from £1 million to £2 million, and they abolished the category.
Yeah. Well, Jean-Francois in our first roundtable, Jean-Francois Harvey was saying if it's 1.5 million, I can easily sell it. So I think 1.5, because he does like all the programs, global programs, so he knows how to, like, comparatively speaking, where we stand. So 1.5 seems like a very reasonable number. EB5 is at 1 million USD right now.
800,000 actually.
Right.
For rural.
For the
regional centers.
800,000. Yeah. So what's the USD right now? 1.4? What are we? I don't know. In a trade war, it's very tricky. We gotta check.
I haven't checked the markets today. I don't know. The rate might have changed a bit.
But yeah, the Canadian equivalent would be what, like 1.2?
1.5, so would make sense.
1.5 is not bad, yeah.
I would also argue when you put that in context, 1.5 million is a bungalow in downtown Toronto. Like, it's not that much money comparatively.
But
anymore.
if we manage it well, if that 1.5 million times 10,000 gets injected into good faith, good intention businesses, not like the businesses we make because we just want to pocket that money and we want to rob a poor foreigner who wants to come to Canada, right? So if we can like use some game theory into like creating incentives that can align, that's a lot of money that can really help us. Like, let's put that in perspective for a second. 800,000 international students come to Canada, and there's a report endorsed by IRCC itself. Their contribution is at like $35 billion. 850,000 students, and they're not even counting their family members, right? If we just get 30,000 at 1.5 million, what is that? That's like $50 billion. We already surpassed the 800 international students, and we're just bringing 30,000 people.
Yeah. And realistic. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, and just imagine that some of these projects are in rural areas where it might help with a healthcare facility or some other area of public infrastructure. But what an easing of the burden for that local community and for a provincial government.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if we put it into good use, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And that integration issue, there's one thing that came up in our roundtables, and I want to get a conclusion to it too. If we have that passive investment, and assuming it's good oversight, we direct the money to places that it's, going to take advantage of it. So the investor is happy, we are happy, the money is coming. That integration aspect manifesting itself into a language requirement, Where would you put the language requirement, David, for a passive investment program, for a federal passive investment program?
To me, that's a less significant issue because that's not the purpose for the program. And if you're saying, well, we also want you to be able to go out and order your meal in the local language, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If it means that there is some basic element so that you can conduct and build a life in Canada in addition to having your investment, well, then I start to get the rationale. So maybe there's a discussion about that, but requiring a high level of English or French facility seems to be gratuitous, I think.
Would you put it at CLB 5?
Probably not that high.
4?
4.
Yeah, 4.
You agree with 4?
4.
You agree with 4?
No.
No? What?
No.
Lower? Higher?
You'd go higher.
Okay, tell me
No,
why.
I would say 5.
Tell me why. Why 5?
Okay.
Between 4 and 5.
So, like, for the startup visa program, that's one of the only real, like, hurdles for people to qualify in the startup visa program. You know, age, education, source of fund, net worth. Those aren't. So the government is kind of fixated on. They know that language is one of the key indicators of successful integration. So I think, as a practical matter, probably not very saleable if we were going to propose, that to the government. Plus, I think that we're getting these investors who have, great business skills, perhaps additional capital to invest, and so on. It's like a wasted resource if we can't encourage them. We don't, I'm not talking about sticks, I'm talking about carrots, integrate them into, investment groups or organizations or whatever. So Keiretsu Forum, which is a designated angel group, they give membership to their startup visa applicants. And it's amazing. I mean, I've seen where, people have come in, they don't have any connections to and, they're always looking back home, but they come into the local environment. They're seeing Canadian and other foreign, new Canadian investors, and they're looking at business opportunities, and they're making decisions whether to invest. And all of a sudden, they're forming networks and so on. I think that is such a good model. I mean, I'm not sure that has to be like a condition, but some kind of a program to encourage integration. Let's take advantage of these people, and actually help them integrate so that you don't have a family that's kind of separated, but where they have some, some incentive and interest, and to do something else.
Some municipalities are getting very good at that. I like that, and I take your point about the language in terms of arguments with government, because that will be an issue, getting the buy-in from officials about.
But then again, I want to take your argument and counter-argue with Charles, because under the passive investment program, right? Under the startup visa program, I understand. Selecting you, Mr. Entrepreneur, Miss Entrepreneur, to come here, you need to have some language ability, right? I'm not saying CLB 5 is a good ability. I'm not even saying that how we measure language and language ability is a good thing, but let's assume it is, right? Under the startup visa, I agree. You have to network. If you have a business, you need to be able to pitch it, right? Yeah. To get some money for it, to get some buy-ins for it, to advertise. But under passive investment, right? Do I really that Tim Bergen rule in economics? What objective is it that I'm after here on the passive investment? Do I want you to bring in a big chunk of money and also come here, go door-to-door network so you can, also bring your business instead of back home to Canada? What do you think, Sarah, about this? Do you think CLB 5, CLB 4? You said CLB 4, but I'm pushing you again.
I said 4.
Yeah.
But I think the networking issue and the integration issue and the sellability issue are all good arguments. I think it can also potentially, if we're looking at caps, also potentially be an intake mechanism as well. That's assuming we have a lot of people who want to invest and want to come here, and we have more than what we need.
I think we have a lot. Let's go back to the UAE example. If UAE can issue 250,000 a year, Canada, I think, let's not forget about our potentials. Like, we know we are doing a lot of things very poorly, but at the same time, we're sitting in, I argue, the best potential in the entire world. So despite all of our shortcomings, I think we're not going to have a popularity problem, right? If we really want to open the door, there are going to be people who want to come in. It's up to us with the oversight, with the management, with the careful consideration and intake process to make sure that we do a good job bringing them in. So integration, we leave out from the passive investment for now, as far as they're bringing. Oh, family. This is another good point. In the first roundtable, we were arguing about this. We were talking about this, that a lot of passive investors, they're bringing in their families, their children, right? And their roots. If you're bringing in your children, your family here, you're growing roots here, despite that you have to, for the sake of making that income, to make sure that your family is living there. Do you think it's a good idea in a passive investment program to give privilege or priority or more points? Priority, let's call it priority for now. To give priority to people who have more children?
That's a bit double-edged, because there's definitely an integration aspect to that and a spending argument to that. And on the other side, family status is an area of discrimination. So if you start getting into, well, you've got 5, you're single, so I don't want you to come, but you've got 5 children, I want you to come, that becomes a dicey area.
Sure, but immigration is discrimination proof, right? Age is a ground of discrimination.
Proof.
Isn't it? Immigration is like, the way we're doing immigration is all discrimination. Like, look at the express entry. We're giving points for age. It's discriminatory, yes. Right? So family is, if in an economic world, I'm not saying this is moral. Yeah. I'm an open board. Personally, I'm an open person, open board, love everybody person. But when we're at this roundtable, when we're talking, hey, pragmatism, let's look at how it's been done. It's okay to discriminate in the immigration system. Is your moral right as a country to choose. Then, okay, family status, if age is okay, I argue family status is okay too. Or what do you guys think?
I'm sort of on the fence on that, to be honest. I think though that on the language issue, if there's no language requirement and you're inviting people in, of course they're going to, create some economic benefit and so on. But what is their chance to become a citizen? Because you have to speak English or French to become a citizen. So you almost want to pre-select people who at least have a shot, to meet the requirement for citizenship. In terms of family size, is it, demographically, yes, more young people. I think that's, we're definitely looking for that. So the actual investor is probably a little bit more senior and not sort of addressing our demographic, needs. So maybe a larger family, there's some rationale to that kind of an argument.
David?
Yeah. I don't feel comfortable with it. I'd have to think about it. I think that I don't know. It's a visceral response. So I wouldn't rule it out. I just like to think through a bit more. I think you've got somebody who qualifies on the main criteria. The money's there. If we have some language requirements, which I think is fine. What else do you want? And in any event, if we're doing this sensibly, and we are reviewing, and we're saying we can tweak this in all sorts of ways, maybe look at it at that point in time. I think inevitably there would be a pilot or trial, whatever you like to call it, maybe modest numbers initially to see how it runs, and there would be some learning from that. So I don't think we would need to agonize over that topic right now.
Can we segue to the final stream that we were talking about? Okay, so far, we're going to fix the startup visa, more oversight, make sure that the startup will target Steve Jobs in his garage. Then we have the investor program, at-risk investment. So if you don't want to engage with a business, it's okay, show me the money, pay the money, do your due diligence, come. What about the people that they want to do business? They want to be engaged, they want to actively manage a business, but they're not the startup category, and they don't have the 1.5 million to pay, right? Something in the middle for the succession tsunami that is coming, right? We want people to take over Canadian businesses. I don't want my over-the-corner grocery store to go bust, the cafe to close. We want fresh blood to take that over. So the question under this stream is, okay, here, one model is do what the provinces did. Hundreds of pages of manuals, performance agreement, net worth, education, job creation, all the loops, all the fire loops that you have to jump through. Or there's the model that we had before at the federal level, right? Show me you have a 300,000 net worth. Just show me that you maintained one job after 2 years. I give you PR. What do we think?
Can I make a preliminary remark going back to earlier comments I said? If you keep it simple, I'm not talking about not hard, have standards, expect and demand quality. But if it's very easy to understand, I qualify or I don't qualify, and people select in, and you give them a process that makes sense and a time frame that makes sense, then you will attract people. Now, I say that because the provincial programs are so complicated, so convoluted. There is an indefinite period where PR may come out if you're really lucky. One will fail, and one's got a chance of succeeding. So, as a basic principle, if you have those straightforward rules that people can understand, then you've got a chance, and then you make the rules. As for the rules themselves, I personally think this is probably a case where you do have a provisional status pending a subsequent review, so that you're tied to performance of some sort. In the absence of that, an entrepreneur program will probably get some very bad press very quickly.
Okay, so David is getting the performance agreement model. Well, we all take your point: clarity, predictability, all of those things. But Charles, what do you think? Do you think the performance agreement, we adopt the performance agreement model? So basically, the third program, SUV PR first, passive investment PR first.
Mm-hmm.
This entrepreneur stream is conditional PR based on your performance. Do you agree? What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, it should be conditional PR. So you are a PR, you are accumulating time towards citizenship, but there's a condition, right, attached to it. And and that should be relatively simple. This program, by the way, historically did not work well because people ended up not being able to get their conditions removed, or the review and the approval of the condition removal, because of a bureaucratic mess, basically, never even occurred. So there are all kinds of people who may have applied to remove conditions. Nothing actually ever happened. There wasn't a proper review, that kind of thing. So that has to be built into this. But this whole succession tsunami, this is a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the ideal scenario. You've got an immigrant coming in who may have background and skills, but they don't know the local market. They don't know the local business environment necessarily, but there's an owner operator there who's now looking to sell their business. Typically, when a business is bought, the owner operator stays on for a year or maybe two to sort of mentor the person who's bought it to manage it through. So I think it's kind of like the perfect scenario. I just think that a conditional period and conditions is a good thing, because otherwise what you're going to have happen is owners take the money, but there's some kind of a buy-sell agreement at the back end where they get some of their money back out and they walk away from the business. Yeah, so that's a very real risk, I think. I also think that building in a component, because often owners who are selling their businesses, they would prefer to sell to their employees, but their employees don't have the capacity, to make that investment. So, the government has recognized this. There's some tax incentives now for employees, employee ownership trusts and things like that. So, it might be possible to structure a program where either the person comes in and takes over the business entirely and is mentored for 2 years, or they come in, invest in the business, but maybe the employees also get a share, and there maybe be an opportunity to fund the employees buying a share of the business as well. But things like that, this is like, people are so desperate right now who are retiring or want to retire, and they just have no options. So, yeah.
Could I share an example from another country? So the UK, at least the way it operated when I was there, then you would come in and get your first work permit, 3-year validity period, various categories. You get a renewal, and just over 2 years after that, you're in the country for 5 years. On the 6th year, you become eligible for citizenship. This is not a million miles from what we're saying, that it's, if we agonize about this provisional thing, I think we're wasting our time, because that sort of model, you still accrue the qualifying period, as you were saying, but you just have to, there's a period at 3 years saying, okay, so just show us that you're still doing that stuff. I don't
So
think
continuity
correct.
is what matters for that program.
Yeah,
Because again,
but you know right from the get-go what will be expected of you at that 3-year mark. It's very clear. It's that transparency that I was talking about. And that sort of thing, I think it's all open. Nobody's got any doubt about what you've got to do.
what do you think, Sarah?
My one concern about putting a condition on the PR for continuity is that we're in a very volatile time in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm concerned about businesses failing because of things that are completely beyond the person's control. So we have another pandemic, business drops off. It's a vulnerable time in a business when you're transitioning ownership. The business fails, but it doesn't fail because the person didn't try or put the effort in, or the structure wasn't there. It was just an economic reality. And then also with these tariffs that have just been introduced, I know multiple clients that are concerned on the impact and the viability of their business based on how those tariffs are going to actualize within their business. And so again, that's something that's completely out of a person's control. And is there a way to manage that and not penalize people for conditions?
Contractually, we can do that. Okay, yeah. So this is a very good point. I'm gonna offer why I think there is a problem if we do all 3 streams PR first. If all of these 3 streams are PR first, and I'm a person with the money, I'd say, why pay 1.5 million in the passive investment? Let me go down to 500,000 active investment. I get the PR. I'm still ahead $1 million, and who cares if the business failed? Right. So we don't want to create that kind of a counter incentive.
I agree.
Right. So if we are doing this entrepreneur, we said provisional. Show me something. Let that something be good faith in the business. If you did everything you could, COVID happened. If you did everything you could, Trump happened. I have to be compassionate enough, not compassionate, that doesn't require compassion. I have to be reasonable enough to say, as long as you gave me your good faith, you put in the money, and if it made business sense to close this business, I'm happy with you. Because that's what we want, right? We don't want, I think we established this. We're not expecting people to come here and start being successful from the get-go. We want to give them room to fail. We want to give them room to learn. We want to give them room to grow. And a part of that is being understandable when they do their best, but nonetheless they fail. So I think if we want to take care of that concern, is probably we allow them to change business plans and also change businesses.
Yeah.
Would that take care of it?
I think there could be a mechanism, but I'm with you. I still prefer a provisional first step for a number of reasons.
What about you, Charles? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a big fan of the work permit to PR, but maybe a conditional PR, and then showing the good faith. The beauty of these successor businesses, by the way, is that you've got all these financials and operating history that's very clear, to demonstrate. So if the person takes over and they completely fail, okay, well, what happened here? They would have to explain it, but they have about as good a chance as anybody to make a go of that particular business.
They probably inherited the accountant who's been dealing with it for years and all of that sort of thing.
And I think we need we have a major oversight problem there too, if we want this program to work, right? Because essentially, we don't have interviews in any other business immigration programs, right? We kind of need like a compassionate immigration officer who's assigned a case, who maintains like direct contact with the client, what happened. Or it's one way of that, I'm not suggesting, but maybe we need another PPP model for also this stream, right? We discussed that the public-private partnership for the startup visa makes sense. The public-private partnership for the startup for the passive investment makes sense. Maybe the same model would make sense here. We need somebody there that liaises and works on good faith with the client, that can report to the government on the states on the status of this business. So if there's failures, we can be reasonably accommodating. Do you think that works here, or do we want to put immigration officers in charge of making business decisions about the assessment of your business?
No, I at first blush, I'm not in favor of that. I don't think more if a business was struggling for the reasons that Sarah mentions or other reasons, they go to there's a point of reference they can go to and say, look, these things have happened. We can make some adjustments and with whatever might take place. But have that by exception. If 80% of businesses say my trajectory at the end of year 3 is looking really good, well, then they can take ownership of the fact that they just have to get their ducks in a row when it comes time for that second phase.
Maybe something more like when you do an Atlantic immigration program, you've got to go see a settlement officer who kind of gives you those resources and points. And maybe in a situation where a business is struggling, the condition would be, okay, the business is struggling. They go to the equivalent of a settlement officer for a business who can say, okay, you've got these services you can access. Here are things that you can do. So we're not leaving them floundering, but also can be a point where you can say, look, I have a certain certification or notification. I have somebody who can verify that I've done everything that I could.
So basically give them the support that they need.
Yep.
At least make sure before we tell them no, before we say, oh, thank you, you brought in your life, your family, your money, your effort, and now you failed because COVID happened, or you failed because, Mr. Trump happened. We give them the support that they need, right? Sure. And that's a paradigm shift. Essentially, that's a paradigm shift in how we do immigration, because we are not support-based immigration. We're all expectation. Do you agree? We expect. It's like, oh, Canada is this, this is another outflow of American exceptionalism, like in Canada in our immigration system. We say, oh, you have to come, you have to be young, you have to be educated, you have to do this, you have to produce, you have to pay taxes, you have to work 3 jobs. But do we sit down and see, are we giving you the support you need? Probably the only support that an immigrant is guaranteed to have is their lawyer, and we are doing everything to even shut the lawyer out. That's just crazy that I just repeated that. So I think we need to change that.
I agree.
A paradigm shift.
Yeah. But I think that if there were some mechanism like the MAC or advisory committee of some sort, the communication flow in all directions from different groups gets a lot better, and I see it as nothing but constructive.
I agree. Yeah.
I think we exhausted this. Yeah. Right?
Well,
let's go to final thoughts.
I was just going to say, I just want to one last comment on it. That feedback loop, and that's a pivotal part of standard organizational development. There isn't I don't think there's a successful company that doesn't have that kind of feedback loop and is constantly trying to improve. And if we don't have that structure, there's no way any of these systems can fail. We can't grow and we can't expand and make sure that our programs are doing what they're supposed to do. And it's not just improving, but it's also updating and modernizing and making sure you're keeping up to date with how things change, which is, the pace of change is very, very quick. So to have those regular feedback loops is pivotal, in my opinion.
Charles?
Yeah, no, I agree totally with that. And I think that's kind of what we're missing. The government does what it can, but having the on-the-ground third-party qualified inputs, is absolutely critical to the success of any business program. So many have not done well or have been closed because the government started something and then it was a problem, maybe 5 years later a problem, and then they shut it because of political pressure or whatever. If those issues or problems were identified earlier and there was a culture of continual improvement, that kind of thing, that would really make the chances of success much higher.
It's not just about the individuals either. It is an opportunity to improve programs and send a message out to prospective candidates in other countries looking around for their options and say, oh, the feedback from Canada is pretty good, and build a pipeline of the sort of immigrants that the country wants and needs.
Yeah, and we can help the government with the political pressure too. If you have an independent body advising you, things go wrong, you can say, oh, I listened to their advice, right? We are pretty good in taking ownership, right? Professionals, business professionals, we're very good in taking ownership. We're saying you can never be mistake-proof. What distinguishes you is when you see the mistake, you do everything you can and you get all the advice and the wisdom you can to make sure that you solve that. and you continuously improve.
Yeah. And I think that, the loop concept is important. We can put as much information as we can into the system. But if we as professionals and hopefully at some point advisors don't understand what the political concerns are as well, we can't help solve for those problems. So it needs to be a bit more of a two-way conversation than just feeding information into a system.
Touche. Mm-hmm. Touche.
Absolutely.
Any last words, David?
No, well, it's been a lot of fun being with everybody. I think and hope that we can collectively make a difference. And so I'll be looking forward to contributing and participating in what goes on in the future. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Charles?
Same here. Exactly what I was thinking. Thank you so much for the opportunity and happy to participate further.
Same here. It's been a wonderful discussion and thank you to everybody for creating the opportunity.
Well, on behalf of our committee, the Business Immigration Committee at CILA, and on behalf of the bigger CILA family, thank you very, very much to give your time and expertise with no expectation for profit or anything like that, just to contribute to the betterment of our country. I cannot expect anything more from my fellow Canadians. So thank you again. Thank you very much. And together, I'm sure and I hope that we can do great things.